where a lot of times I think entrepreneurs are told, follow your passion, right? And you hear this remark, if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. And that's great. But, skateboarding was a passion of mine. Snowboarding was a passion of mine. Music was a passion of mine. Having a coffee shop where musicians and artists could display their music and work was a passion of mine. But the issue is it never solved a problem for anybody, right? Nobody ever asked me to do any of those things. I did them because I thought they were my passions, and I believed the rhetoric that if I followed my passions, I'd be happy and successful. When I started finding problems and then started thinking about business solutions to those problems and then applying the mistakes from the 10 years in the past, then problems became the center of everything I was doing, not passion. And once I started addressing problems and not passion, I started being a very successful entrepreneur.
Support for this show comes from Exit Factor. Exit Factor offers a proven method that helps small to mid-sized business owners maximize their company's value. Through one-to-one consulting services and online programs, the trusted advisors at Exit Factor teach entrepreneurs how to successfully navigate and fully leverage strategies when buying, building, and selling their companies. Participants that follow the program have experienced considerable results, with some increasing business value as much as 57% in 1 year. It's time to start running your business every day like you are going to sell it. Learn more at exitfactor.com/pod. Now enjoy How I Sold.
Welcome to How I Sold, presented by Exit Factor. Only 13% of all businesses in the U.S. are sold, but we only hear about the billion-dollar stories. Here we explore the real-life stories of entrepreneurs and business owners like you that were able to build, grow, and sell their small businesses. Now, here is your business exit expert, #1 best-selling author, and host, Jessica Fialkovich.
Welcome to How I Sold. I'm Jessica Fialkovich, and I created this podcast after spending over a decade in mergers, acquisitions, and exits, and noticing that we often hear the stories of the unicorn sales, those companies that are valued at over $1 billion, but we often don't hear about the real life stories, the stories of thousands of entrepreneurs that sell every year. These are their stories. And today on the show, follow your problems, not your passion. Travis Luther, a serial entrepreneur, joins us and he shares his journey. Now, Travis is a true born-to-be entrepreneur that started his first business selling mice to pet shops in middle school. Through the years, he built multiple businesses, faced business closures, lawsuits, and acquisitions, all before the age of 21. But these experiences allowed him to hone the skills he needed to become the great entrepreneur and build the companies that have made him successful today, including Queen Anne Pillow, which he recently sold. This conversation includes a ton of tactical takeaways and learning lessons from Travis that he wished he knew in the earlier days. So let's jump in. Welcome everyone to this episode of How I Sold. I'm really excited to have with me today a good friend of mine, colleague, fellow member of the Entrepreneurs Organization, Travis Luther. Travis, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, so you've got a great story that we're going to dive into. You're a serial entrepreneur, but really we're going to focus on, one core business later in the show. But we start back at the beginning with everybody that comes on our episode. So tell us, who Travis Luther is. Where were you born? Where did you grow up? What was childhood like for you?
Yeah, I was born in Los Angeles, so one of the biggest, cities in the country. And then very shortly after my birth, my parents split up, and my mom moved me to this town called Steptoe, which is one of the smallest towns in the country, a population of about 13 people. So from the time I was a toddler up until the time I left Washington State, I lived in all these small rural towns in Washington State with various populations of 13 to 250. Before eventually landing in Pullman, Washington, and spending a majority of my growing up there. Like every good entrepreneur, I had a bunch of paper routes. I first started my business career selling newspaper subscriptions on my paper route when I realized I could make more money if I delivered more paper. So that was kind of where I got my first taste of doing business by myself. And then in fifth grade, I accidentally stumbled upon two mice that I captured and put in a aquarium in my bedroom, and they ended up making a lot of babies, which I didn't know what to do with. So I took them down to the pet store, and the pet store agreed to buy them to feed the snakes. So that was my real business in fifth grade, was selling feeder mice to the pet store in my little town.
Oh my God. I've never heard that story before. That's too funny. So you are the stereotypical entrepreneur. You knew basically since you could walk and put a business together, that was your path. So you got the paper routes, you have the mice feeding business, we'll call it, in fifth grade.
The snake feeding business, feeding the snakes.
That's right. Steak feeding. Yeah. You're growing the feed.
The irony being that I've been a vegetarian for over a decade, so I don't know if you were connected, but
maybe that left an impression on you or something.
Yeah.
So middle school, you've got everything figured out. Moving into high school, are you still developing businesses on the side, or what are you doing at that point?
Yeah, in high school, part of that story, part about my mom moving and being, living in rural small towns and stuff is that, my mom was a single mom of three kids. My father was a drug addict and an alcoholic. And, as for many kids in that situation, that leaves you, living in poverty, and we were no exception. My mom was on food stamps, and we pretty much got everything for a majority of our young lives through government assistance or the assistance of welfare associations. So, a lot of used Christmas presents, a lot of government cheese, a lot of, chicken and pork in a can. And so by the time I got to my freshman year of high school, I really had a clear understanding that any of the opportunities that I was going to have in life were going to have to come through me. I got very serious about learning more about business and entrepreneurship, and that coincided with my father getting really sick and having to be put in hospice care. And eventually, as a sophomore in high school, I had to make the decision to drop out and take informal custody of my two young brothers and really just kind of make my own life from there. And so one of the first things I did is I started a skateboard and snowboard shop in this old building that was downtown. And I was 16 years old when I started that with a buddy of mine. By that time, I think the people in the town knew I lived on my own, was taking care of my brothers, but I don't think anyone ever thought I was only 16 years old. So I never ran into any problems signing a lease or legal agreements. But that business lasted about 6 months, and then somebody broke into it and they stole everything. And we had a lot of things on credit and a lot of things on consignment. So at 17, I faced my first lawsuit, which, if you've been in business long enough, everyone will have their first lawsuit, but mine was at 17 years old. I didn't tell the judge I was a minor. I didn't try and pass the buck on to my parents. I took it on the chin, as they say. And then for the next year or two, had my wages garnished to pay for all of that stuff that had gotten stolen. Right about the time that I was out of debt, I decided it was time to do it again, and opened up a coffee shop with the same guy that I had the skateboard shop with.
So, obviously you had a lot of inspiration and motivation driving you, right? You're now the sole producer for your family. Your mom's counting on you, your brother's counting on you. But a lot of people in that situation, would just crush under the pressure. What do you think was that internal force of forcing you to figure it out? It's not like you knew how to open a skateboard shop at 16 or a coffee shop at 17. How did you figure that stuff out, or what was your attitude in those situations?
A lot of it was just forced upon me. I don't think I was any kind of special genius, but I think there was something special about being the oldest child in that situation and having just maybe a years more perspective than maybe my younger brothers did about what was going on. But always being the oldest child, even from the time I was 5, my mom said from the time I was 35, from the time I was 5, I always was just more mature, more interested in hanging out with adults, thinking more long term. And I think that as the pressures of being the kind of caretaker mounted year over year, by the time I was, 15 or 16, I was very comfortable in making my own decisions, and I was very comfortable in leading people, leading my family, leading my classmates. And I just knew that I was going to have to do it for myself. I think kind of the double-edged sword of poverty is that rather than you see a poor kid and you think to yourself, there's somebody that I could do a little bit for and it would go a long way. Unfortunately, most people who are in a position to help poor kids don't want their kids hanging out with them, or they don't want they think that there's always going to be a negative side to being around somebody who doesn't have resources or doesn't have parents who are around. And it makes things a lot harder. Probably a lot of kids don't realize that they're not being helped, and they just maybe think that they're not good or that they're not smart or that they're not capable. And I just had a little bit more foresight, probably from all the responsibility that I had, that I did realize I was good. I didn't know how good I could be, and I didn't know how I was going to get there. But I believed in myself and the possibilities for myself. And I just started to pursue things. The other nice thing about being poor is you don't have anything to lose. And so it's
Right.
like, I mean, like, what the hell else was I going to do? Right. Like, I could take chances that maybe, you do have friends and you have family around you. And I'm sure you've seen this as an entrepreneur who are always very cautious when you come with a new idea. Right. Like, and if you don't have those supportive people around you, you also don't really have a bunch of people telling you what you can't do. So I had a lot of freedom. I was very risk adverse because I had nothing to lose. And I dove into a lot of things probably without thinking as much about them as I would these days.
Yeah. Well, what a great, interesting insight on it too. Is like looking at it almost like from a positive perspective is that you had this freedom, you had this opportunity to kind of learn as you go. And obviously we'll get into all the businesses you've started since then, but let's jump back in. So you're 17 running a coffee shop. What's next, right? Are you dominating the coffee world or what?
So I was actually 19.
Okay.
I was 19. So that the skateboard and snowboard shop that we had was upstairs in a bakery and coffee shop called the Combine Mall. Combine's a little thing that harvests wheat in the little rural areas that we grew up. And the owner of that place decided she wanted to move and retire and go to San Francisco to be with her family. And for whatever reason, she absolutely refused to sell the business. Maybe you've had this experience, but it was a great business and she just didn't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
So rather than sell the business, she just locked it up and left. And so we lived in Pullman, Washington, which was a college town. And I was a freshman now in college. Even though I had dropped out of high school, I later got my GED, took my ACT, and decided I was going to at least try college. And so that left a huge void in the town for a place where college students could come hang out. She had a stage upstairs where they would have concerts and art shows, and then downstairs was all the food in the bakery. And so ironically, that pet store that I sold those mice to when I was in 5th grade moved, and it was sitting vacant downtown for a couple of years. It was disgusting. I mean, I could see why no one rented it once I got the idea that I was going to put a coffee shop in it. Yeah. But I went to go tour it, and it was so nasty. They had a reptile room in there and an aquarium, and so it was covered in mold, and the carpets were disgusting, and everything had to be gutted. And so anyway, I found a wonderful old man, Mr. Neal, who owned that building and took a chance on me and kind of allowed me to come in there and put in a coffee shop and, put some rent payments off and pay for a little bit of the remodel, if you will. We went in there and I mean, we started tearing out walls and, fighting all sorts of dead critters. If you had seen the construction, you would have never had a cup of coffee or a sandwich from that place when it was completed. But, we did manage to get it going. I had two partners at the time. Like I said, the same guy that had the skateboard and snowboard shop with me, and then another friend of ours. I think that I was the only one who really kind of understood what it took to have a successful business, and my other two partners, I think, were most attracted by the idea of owning a place, but not really working it. We were all trying to go to college too, and so. Yeah. I finished the semester I was in and started, pursuing the coffee shop full time. And my partners they wouldn't really get on board. Their involvement was largely coming in, opening the cash register, taking out the money they thought that they were owed, and then leaving, right? Which didn't leave a lot of money to pay other people or anything like that. And we finally resolved that situation about the time when this man walked into my coffee shop and he said, "Hey, I own this other drive-through place called the Pony Espresso. and I'm leaving town. I want to go open at the time it was the TCBY yogurt company or something
Oh,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Frozen yogurt.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
frozen yogurt's like exploding. This guy decides he wants to get out of the coffee business and he wants to go move out of town and do frozen yogurt. So he basically hands me the keys and he says, whatever arrangement you want to make, I will let you buy this business and this building from me. Whatever you want to do. And I think we came up with some agreement like, okay, I'll pay you $400 a month for the next 10 years. Or I don't remember what it was, but it was, it was super generous. I learned very quickly why, because there wasn't as much business at that place as I thought there was. And there was this huge mortgage payment on the building and stuff. So I really had gotten in over my head. So I just basically lost my partners. I didn't have any support of my partners. They had kind of cleared the till on the cash that I had. I just agreed to buy this second location, kind of thinking that this might be the saving grace to get me out of it. And what happens is now I'm trying to manage both these stores on really a little bit of cash flow. And the city manager walks into the front of my Main Street store and he says, hey, great news. This ballot initiative that we put together last year passed, and now we're going to close down Main Street. We're going to widen the sidewalks. We're going to put in all these bike racks. And I was like, what?
Yeah. No.
And he's like, so your customers will be able to come in back through the alley, but Main Street is going to be closed for like 6 months. And that was just it. I mean, that was like kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. I think we lasted a month in that scenario, but no one was coming downtown now because there was nowhere to park. It was also the summer, so all the students had left too, who made up the bulk of my business. And so I made a call to another woman who had some drive-through coffee shops in some other towns near me, who I knew had told me at one time, I'd love to own your place, but I would never compete with you. I gave her a call and explained the situation, and she basically came in and saved me from my debts and everything. So I wouldn't really call that a sale, but that business does still exist today, largely because she was able to come in and operate it and keep it going through those tough times.
Wow. So how old are you at this point? 21.
I just turned 21. Okay, I
just
turned 21 at the point that I gave her the keys. Yeah.
So at 21, you've been through multiple businesses. You've been through your first lawsuit. You've been through your first partnership breakup. First acquisition and first exit. All at 21.
That's right.
That's an amazing learning experience condensed into a very early stage in life that I know set you up to do bigger, better things. But I love all that stories. What God, there's probably so many learning lessons, but what do you think is like the biggest thing you took away from that situation, moving on to your next stage in life?
Definitely partners, right? Like definitely being more like partner expectations, right? I think, I've since then, and you know this, but your listeners don't, but I went on to grad school and I ended up becoming a college professor for a number of years. And there's a lot of lessons that I teach from that experience in my entrepreneur courses. But the one that I knew at that moment, right? So I learned a lot of lessons in reflection, but the one that I really left that knowing is we had 3 people who started a coffee shop, and all 3 of those people who started the coffee shop did it with the expectation that we could all make $1 million a year. Right. And we believed we could make $1 million a year because we believed if we did it right, and we got enough customers down that we could do that. Yeah. But I realized like there was never even the capacity. There was never even the population in that town. Like we could be slinging coffee 24/7 unless we also sold a Chevy or something with that coffee. Like we were never going to even gross $1 million, let alone net $1 million each. And so, I think they all kind of came to that realization probably a lot sooner than I did, that the whole thing was a money suck and that divided by 3, none of us were really going to make a living. But I definitely knew after that, okay, the next business I do, whether it's with partners or not, I really need to understand what the true revenue potential of it is so that I know that if I go into something, it has the possibility to return to me what I have in mind for it, rather than thinking you could go into anything and have it return for you what you want from it.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think part of like being an entrepreneur is you have to have that spirit, that positive mindset that like anything's possible, anything could happen, right? Otherwise, how do you get through the day to day? But also like part of becoming a good entrepreneur, a great entrepreneur is having some of that positivity or reality based in fact, right?
Yeah.
And like you're talking about with the market research, but you do have to believe, right? With every idea that you can crush it. Cause if you don't, I mean, how do you get through the ups and downs and the roller coaster ride?
That's right. Yep. You have to live with an unrealistic amount of optimism
Yeah.
to even be marginally successful. Yep.
Yeah. So you're 21. You've been through in a couple of different businesses now. Let's jump forward a little bit. You mentioned that you go back to grad school, you become a professor. Let's kind of fast track how you get to the business that we're here to talk about today. Just kind of an overview for the listeners there.
Yeah. So I leave the coffee shop. Are we allowed to swear on your
Yes, so you're fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I say, fuck this. I see an ad. This is at the very early days of the internet. So I see an ad on this is literally 99. This was 99 when I turned the keys over. Okay. So I see an ad on monster.com for a McDonald's second assistant manager making $33,000 a year, which is more money than I could have ever conceived of in my life. So I move to LA and I take that job and I move in with my grandfather. I try and have a music career down there. I think that's what I'm really going to pursue as my passion as a guitar player. Doesn't quite work out. I moved to Seattle. I moved back in with an ex-girlfriend thinking that might be the future. It doesn't quite work out. But she's a person who had two very successful parents who always was saying these entrepreneurial dreams are pipe dreams. This music dream is a pipe dream. It's fun to do for a while, but you need to go back to college and you need to get a degree and be a normal person, like stop having all these wild dreams. Her and I break up, but a part of that conversation stuck with me, and I did start to live in this space where I really was questioning that. At the time when I was living in Seattle, I had a promotional record label. Basically, we did sampler CDs for other record labels that we gave away free at record stores so that people who bought records could learn about other acts, so it wasn't my music personally, but it was in the music business. But that was marginally successful, but I just had this voice in my head that's like, maybe you don't have what it takes, so I moved to Denver to go back to college. One of my best friends had moved here to go to grad school, so I returned to college. And while I'm in school, I'm working as a valet at night, parking really fancy people's cars, and I'm handing all these rich people these tickets, and I think to myself, gosh, like, it would be cool to put ads on these tickets, so that you can reach all these rich people because they have money and they'll buy whatever. So I proposed that to the owner of my valet company, and he said, I don't think that'll work, but if you want to pursue it, go ahead. And I said, great. If you don't think it's going to work, can I also partner with all the other valet companies in town so that I can have like the biggest spread? Yeah. And he said, yeah, go for it. And within 2 weeks, I had Mercedes-Benz as a client. So now I'm going to school, and then I get the Nuggets as a client and the Avalanche and the Pepsi Center. So now I have a Mercedes-Benz for my deal. I've got courtside seats to the Nuggets and the Avalanche. I've just come to Denver because I think I'm a terrible entrepreneur, and now I'm having like more success than I've ever had in my life. And this is the point where things really started to click for me. I started really applying those lessons I had learned in all those other failures about understanding what is my cost of goods sold, what is my profit margin, what do I need to make, how do I develop a sales pipeline, how do I make attractive and unique offers? Like, these things are now all coming together for me, and this is what leads me to Queen Anne Pillow, which is the company that we were able to exit late last year. Is that I just started seeing that where a lot of times I think entrepreneurs are told, follow your passion, right? And you hear this remark, if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. And that's great. But, skateboarding was a passion of mine. Snowboarding was a passion of mine. Music was a passion of mine. Having a coffee shop where musicians and artists could display their music and work was a passion of mine. But the issue is it never solved a problem for anybody, right? Nobody ever asked me to do any of those things. I did them because I thought they were my passions, and I believed the rhetoric that if I followed my passions, I'd be happy and successful. When I started finding problems and then started thinking about business solutions to those problems and then applying the mistakes from the 10 years in the past, then problems became the center of everything I was doing, not passion. And once I started addressing problems and not passion, I started being a very successful entrepreneur.
I love that. I think, and it was actually funny because as you were telling the ballet story, it's like, oh, now you're starting to solve problems, right? And I'm totally in agreement with you with the passion thing. Is we are all told to follow our passions. But, one thing I've discovered, and we're friends, so I'll throw you in this bucket too, is that I'm weird. Like, I am not like normal people, and neither are you, right? So sometimes the things I like and think are going to be really cool, like there's a pretty small market for that,
Right.
right?
Right.
But once like you do pivot and you start finding problems that a mass market would find interesting to solve. So that's, yeah. And I love the instant success with the ballet company. So whatever ended up happening with that company?
I just got more successful with my other company that followed that. I mean, I did a lot of valet advertising for a number of years, and then it kind of became a side project of some of my bigger companies. I would say, I thought at some point about selling it, but I was just so busy with other things I was doing. And then I will tell you now, in retrospect, it would have been a terrible business to buy, because once Lyft and Uber became popular, then the use of valet really took a dump. And not only were fewer people, parking their cars, but fewer people, places even started off, Elways, which was like our big steakhouse here in Denver, doesn't even have valet anymore because just not enough people are using it. So it went the way of the Blockbuster video, I guess you could say. It just ran out of its time technologically.
Yeah, well, then you have COVID, and then people didn't want to get in other people's cars, and now valet is like dead. It's a rarity that you pull up to a place that valets anymore. So I kind of miss that a little bit. So we're talking about problems, and you mentioned Queen Anne pillow. So what brought you to that problem in that company to solve that solution?
Yeah, so after or during ballet ads, I met my wife, who was a lawyer. Actually, I met her while down in front of a valet stand. And I started a legal technology company called Trialline, because she was telling me about all the problems lawyers were having in finding people who understood technology and the law. And I was pretty good at technology and design. And so I transitioned my little marketing company to just address lawyers, and it was awesome. It really took off really fast, even faster than the ballet company. But as I was getting as I was becoming more and more successful, I was spending more and more time at my desk, right? I was spending less time doing all those other things I used to do, like skateboard and snowboard. And suddenly I had all this money, so I was eating food like I'd never eaten before. Every night was a bottle of red wine and filet mignon with lobster or some kind of hollandaise sauce on toast. I mean, just everything was like, I was just having everything I never had before, right? I'm smoking cigars, and I'm not paying a lot of attention to the fact that I'm also getting very fat, like those cigar chomping pigs on I think the Warrant album cover or something. But so I start to have these back problems, and so I hear these ads about, all these pillows that can solve your neck pain problems, but I couldn't find a pillow that said it could help with your back pain problems. That kind of stuck with me. Long story short, I lost a bunch of weight. I ended up having to have a couple back surgeries anyway that were, unrelated to the weight, but I still had this problem with pillows. I couldn't find anything that made me comfortable. And so I started researching pillows online, and I could find 5,000 different pillows, and I could find pillows that range from $5 to $500, but I could never understand what the difference was. Like, why is this pillow that says it's down $5 and this one that says it's down $500? And so I started doing research, and that coincided with me also reaching out to a commercial pillow manufacturer, asking them if I could just make my own personal pillows, if I could screw around with the different fills and stuff and send them back and have them sewn up and sent back to me. And they agreed to that. And after a while, I made a set of pillows for myself that I really liked, and also learned that buying pillows online is like, I called it pillow roulette, right? Like, you have no idea what you're going to get or why it matters. And I did a search, since I had some expertise in online marketing, to see how many other people were searching these different pillow problems that I was searching. And I found something like 25 million searches.
Wow.
And which is tremendous. And so I thought to myself, if I could start a pillow company that didn't necessarily claim to have any kind of like magic, new magic technology or anything like that, but had a focus on the education piece, that said, if you are someone who has neck pain consider this type of pillow. If you are someone who has back pain, consider this type of pillow. And if you want to know why this pillow costs more than this pillow, it's for this reason. If you want to know why some pillows are firm and some pillows are really soft, this is why. I thought, man, I could be pretty successful at that.
No, as I say, it's interesting too, because now you start with a personal problem that you had, but now you back it with research and finding that research. I mean, 25 million searches a month is incredible, right? That's a huge market. So now you've got this personal problem that you're solving, but it's also solving it for millions of people across the country.
That's right. That's right. And the pushback from your friends is like kind of similar to what Zappos had, right? No one's ever going to buy a pillow online because they're never going to be able, to test it or to hold it or squeeze it or whatever. And so I was like, well, then we'll just have these like obnoxious guarantees about satisfaction. And if you're not satisfied, we'll send you pillows until you are. But so I faced the objections. The people who were manufacturing my personal pillows for me agreed to be my partner in manufacturing the new pillows. I can see there's 25 million searches a month. So I launched this company. I sit there and I wait, and nothing happens. So I start buying all these Google ads, and I start to get a little traction, but then my supplier calls me and he says, wow, I got some bad news. The middle class in China is exploding and they're buying all the down and feather, and now your prices are going to go up 300%. And I was like, good God, I just kind of figured out how to sell a couple pillows a month using advertising. And now I don't know if I can do this with the pricing going up. So I kind of just put it to the side. And I had this friend, Brad, who kept telling me, you got to get on Amazon. You got to get on Amazon. And I kept telling him, no, we're a luxury brand. Like, we're not, Amazon's not our place. And I have a second back surgery and I'm lying in bed. And I have nothing to do for 2 weeks because I can't move. And so I think, you know what? I'm going to take Brad's advice. I'm sitting here. I might as well just put these things on Amazon and see what happens. And I mean, it was like turning on a faucet, wow. That first day, I think we sold, I don't know, $800 worth of pillows, which doesn't sound like a lot, but considering I was selling like $1,500 a month worth of pillows, it was pretty exciting. Yeah. So I just dove into that. I dove into the Amazon world and how people buy advertising on there and how the listings are made. And I realized, it's pretty much all this search engine optimization and online marketing stuff I've been doing on the legal side. I just apply those strategies to Amazon. Maybe I will be successful. And as soon as we started stocking our product there and buying ads, I mean, that as members of EO, we have to have businesses that do $1 million a year in sales. And Lawfather, my first EO business, took me almost 10 years to get there. And Queen Anne Pillow took us 18 months to hit that number. So it was pretty impressive growth.
When we come back in just a moment, how the launch of a new distribution channel scales Queen Anne overnight and becomes so successful that Travis has to face and solve problems he didn't even imagine when he first started the company. Stay with us. I'm Jessica Fialkovich, and you are listening to How I Sold.
Support for this show comes from Exit Factor. Have you ever wondered if your business is sellable? The truth is, thousands of businesses sell every year, from just a few $1,000s to billions. Now, there are a ton of experts that will teach you how to start a business, more on how to grow one, but only Exit Factor will teach you how to build a valuable and efficient business that is sellable at any time, no matter what happens. Visit exitfactor.com/pod to learn more about us and take our free assessment to find out if your business is sellable. That's exitfactor.com/pod.
Hey, welcome back to How I Sold. I'm Jessica Fialkovich, and we're with Travis Luther, founder of Queen Anne Pillow. Now, Travis already has a ton of experience when he launches Queen Anne through businesses in the coffee, sports, and advertising spaces. And don't forget, he still has his main business, Trial Line, which is a legal software company that he's running while launching Queen Anne. But sometimes when you're building your side hustles or your side businesses, they quickly become bigger than you imagined and become the main business that you need to focus on. This transition was about to happen for Travis. Are you a big believer in the Amazon business model then? If you know how to play the game on there, you think that's a marketplace that's creating millionaire entrepreneurs?
I think it is definitely creating millionaire entrepreneurs. And I think it's harder to be successful there than it was, 8 years ago when I started. Um, Amazon takes such a big bite out of everything now that it kind of got to the point where the profitability that we realized from the sale from our own website and the profitability we realized from Amazon was about the same, even though Amazon represented 80% of all of our sales.
Wow.
So they're like a 50-50 partner. So if we charge $100 for a pillow, Amazon is getting at least $50 of that. And and I mean, I could give a whole seminar on Amazon, but pillows are oversized too, and these are things you have to take into account. So we have big boxes; they require more storage, so the prices have to get higher and higher. And there were times when I was looking at what it would cost for us just to remain profitable on certain products, thinking, I can't believe people are going to pay this much for a pillow, but that's like what we have to do to be on there,
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So you're on Amazon now, you're growing, obviously this is earlier too. So it's a little bit easier to grow fast. What are some of the challenges you face along this growth path with Queen Anne?
I think inventory, right? So, what happens is our pillows are made in America, but some of the pillows have components shipped from all over the country. From all over the world. So we might get some feathers from Europe, and we might get some milled cotton from China, and we might get some synthetics from California. But more and more of it being overseas. And so, the challenges are the more you sell, the more you have to stock. And you'd think that would be a good problem, but that means the more capital that you have to have basically sitting on shelves or sitting out in boats on the ocean. And so the cost to operate what was becoming a marginally smaller and smaller profit margin for Amazon, who was also selling more and more into, requiring more inventory, is that the cash flow really grinds to a halt. And so while your numbers may look awesome and you're growing, what you're able to put in your pocket, you have to start taking a break from it and start allocating that cash that would, normally go to you to just covering these inventory expenses.
Wow. So, is this the time like that you start thinking about maybe an exit is a better path, or are there other things that you attempt first to solve that cash flow issue before you move towards exit?
Yeah, an important part of the Queen Anne story is this is like the first business since my first business is that I took on a partner, and that partner was my father-in-law. So my father-in-law, at some point, while was kind of ramping Queen Anne Pillow up, had retired. He had a career in bedding, not recently, but as a younger man, he had worked as a bedding buyer, so he had some familiarity with it, and he just wanted something to do. And so when I brought him on as a partner, this is really a good lesson too in kind of expectations. I think both our expectations were that the pillow business was also kind of a side business. He wanted something he could do, generate some additional income from. I wanted a product-based business that I could, generate some additional income from. But my focus was still always on my legal technology business. So as it's really taking off, my father-in-law is excited about the fact that we're putting a lot of cash in our pockets, and I'm thinking as a younger entrepreneur, we have a real opportunity here to really blow this up.
Mm-hmm.
So he had a lot more cautiousness than I had, and what he wanted out of the business was actually ironically always what he wanted out of the business. I'm the one who changed. What I wanted out of the business was to really say, gosh, we have a really good opportunity here to build a $10 million company, $100 million company. Why don't we go for that?
Mm-hmm.
And he was up for the discussions, but a little more measured in the implementation. And then at the same time, what he wanted out of the business is getting harder and harder to get because so much more of our cash is now being tied up in inventory. So some of the things we tried to do marginal, improvements was add more products. And so we slowly added products. So we would add pillow protectors, and then we added comforters. We added some robes. I can't remember some of the other things that we added, but so while those increased revenue, they kind of compounded the problem that we were going through, which is we're spending more and more cash. And so now we're spending more and more cash because we have more and more products and we have to keep more and more inventory. So we're taking less and less money home. And this is a situation I could tolerate and get through. But as my father-in-law is getting older and not really looking for that much excitement, whether in business or finance, we just kind of got to a point where we had to make a decision about what we wanted to do. And we were really getting to, what do we want to do? Does he want to sell to me? Do we want to sell together? Do we want to, move on or blow this thing up when COVID hit? And so, COVID hits in 2020 and all my businesses in March, they just die. I mean, it was very frightening. But Queen Anne Pillow suddenly in April, like Frankenstein.
Everybody goes shopping online, right?
Yeah, it kind of comes back to life. And not only that, it takes off, right? Like it really takes off. And so that was exciting. But now, as people know, eventually that led to these supply chain issues that a lot of people are still digging out of. And we were no exception to that. And now we've really got these compounded problems of our revenue is looking great. It's growing. Like I think it grew like 25% over the first year of COVID. But we have so much more product just sitting on ships in the ocean or sitting in Amazon. And I think we also created a valuation that was maybe a little higher than I could buy my father-in-law out at,
Yeah.
So we also created a good company that was going to be a little too expensive for me to pay cash for. And at his age, he wasn't really interested in working out a payment arrangement. And so, we decided that this would be a good time for both of us to sell and just walk away. And so that's when we engaged you guys and started that process.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a couple good points I want to hit on through that is that, a lot of people create product-based companies because you think, hey, I'm going to open the store and people are going to walk in, right? Whether it's walking in or going online and buy products off the shelves. And I mean, I've been there too. I owned a wine business in my first business, and that was part of the reason we did it. But I think one of the big issues with product-based businesses is that cash flow issue, right? You can have a super successful, high revenue, even high profit company, but like what you explained is you can have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars tied up in inventory in different stages of the process. And I think I wanted to touch on it because it's a key thing. If we have listeners out there that are thinking about creating their first business or have been in service and product looks, the grass is always greener, right?
Yeah.
It's a key issue that people forget. And sometimes like as you guys experienced, as you become more successful, the cash demands, really become more important on the business. So,
yeah, I mean, people always kind of lending armchair advice, hey, why don't you get in Bed Bath and Beyond, or why don't you get in Costco? And the answer is because it would kill us. Like I could never afford that. Like we can never afford that. Like it does sound great to say that our pillows are in every Target or whatever you want to say, but the economics of it for a small company, even $1 million company, are really hard to make work without a massive capital infusion, because you're saying, look, I'm trying to take a business that, we'll just use the $1 million mark. Like I'm trying to take a $1 million business, and now I need to, within one sales meeting with the people of Target, I need to 50x that. I mean, how many stores do you think Target has? They probably have got 25 just in Denver, right? So
yeah,
just the idea of adding 100 times that inventory to just make up a fraction of what Target has means I've got to go out and find somebody with $50 million who can back me on this. And that's not really easy, even if you've got an agreement with Target. It's not that easy.
Yeah.
I mean,
no.
$50 million is a lot of money to find lying around. So
yeah. And then you usually get lower margins on those sales, right? Because you're negotiating with Target. It's not like, you're just setting your prices on your own website. Target obviously is who they are because they can negotiate good buying deals. So I think it's a great point. Yeah.
And then they want you to support that inventory with additional advertising. So it's really expensive to have a successful product-based business, for sure.
Yeah. Very expensive, very difficult. So you guys are at this point. Another point I wanted to bring up, and we talk about this a lot through our companies as exit factor and thing, is to sell at or near the peak, right? You never want to sell at the very peak, and you obviously don't want to sell coming down the other side of the mountain, right? But so you guys really saw the writing on the wall through what was going to be required of the business of the next step. Did you know that you were close to that peak of the business without having to do another large cash infusion? Is that kind of what propagated that timing for you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like I said, right before COVID, we were having more serious discussions about what the resolution of Queen Anne Pillow was going to be. And then over COVID, having that first year of growth and then seeing that growth sustained, albeit not to the level it was at over 2020, but seeing it sustained through 2021, we could now say like we were always a growing business. And then we were growing quickly and we were growing quickly consistently, right? So that was a good time to get evaluation and try to sell because everything was moving in the right direction. And we were pretty much at our limit as far as like our turnaround times had gone from sometimes 3 weeks on something to 6 months, right? And we were living just like a lot of other people in our position, living scared and really buying a lot up front, to just say send it whenever you can get it because
Yeah.
our revenue could have been maybe even 35% more of what we had, but we were just out of stuff. We had sold so much over those 2 years of COVID, and our suppliers had gotten so behind, and shipping had gotten so slow, and the ports. I mean, the U.S. didn't do us any favors by, you remember those people that were like wiping down all their groceries on their porch. Like, I mean, the government was
I think
acting
my in-laws were doing that.
yeah, the government was kind of
Yeah.
acting the same way at these shipping ports, right? Rather than just like moving everything up to where it needed to go, now it suddenly had to sit there and get wiped down and you had to do inspections and stuff. So, yeah, I mean, 2 years of really good growth combined with longer, run times on shipping and products. We knew we weren't going to be able to continue to grow without a massive capital infusion, and we also knew that we had a good business that was going to be attracted to somebody who did. And so we said, yeah, let's go ahead and sell now.
Yeah. And I think that's great insight. And I think it's an important point too, is that, we hear a lot of stories, and part of the reasons is why I'm doing this podcast is we hear a lot of these stories about these $1 billion exits where they time it perfectly. They have like a 10-year exit plan. And in reality, that's not really what happens. It's entrepreneurs like us that are evaluating the current state of our businesses appropriately and making a real time decision. There might not be a lot of time leading up to, hey, I think I'm going to sell, to listing it on the market. Like sometimes it's a year window, sometimes it's 3, and sometimes it's, a week or 2, really,
Yeah.
depending on having that foresight. And sometimes we don't know what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So now you're moving into the deal process, and I'm really interested. I mean, you're truly a serial entrepreneur, right? Like I hear lots of people claim that they're a serial entrepreneur, but like you've been in the mice business, you've been in the skateboarding business, coffee business, ballet, legal, technology, philo, right? So, but this is one of your first formalized exits. So I'm interested for you going through this process, like, engaging a broker, going through like a formalized bidding process. Like, what did you learn about the process, and what were some personal challenges that you overcame too?
I was following a lot of Amazon-based company valuations at the time, right? So I was hearing a lot of these really great stories about Amazon-based businesses selling for 10, 15x on, revenue. And my eyes were getting really wide. And so I've started to engage some of those companies who are buying and consolidating, homewares and stuff like that in Amazon. And I learned pretty quickly that our business didn't really fall in that model. We're a true manufacturer. We actually manufacture our products, our pillows, and we actually put them together, and our people actually sew them shut and put them in boxes and mail them to people. And that's not what those product-based Amazon store valuations were getting. Those were people who were literally buying phone chargers, slapping their logo on them, and then never
touching it.
Just shipped it from China right to wherever it went. And we had a more, familial based, family based business that actually, had a lot of customer service and a lot of repeat customers and built their own stuff. So that changed what the multiple was going to look like. I think that was the first, I wouldn't call it setback, but that was the first leveling experience to what the value of our company might be. But then from there, I just kind of looked at, I got online and tried to find other bedding businesses or pillow businesses that were for sale and try to get a sense of what their revenue was and what their sale price was. And, there just weren't a lot. There wasn't a lot to do that. So then I had to go to trusted friends, go to Jessica and say, hey, I think you and your husband gave me some advice, it's just some personal advice before I was really ready to sell. And then I think when we made the decision to sell, you put me into contact with one of your brokers who could really walk us through, what he was seeing in the market, what he'd seen in years past, and some of the things we should expect and learn about. And some of the ways that these deals are structured. I have some things I have a couple of things I really want to share that I was really impressed with and didn't appreciate before. But the first is, I didn't know how people even buy a business because I never bought a business. I heard about SBA loans and stuff, but I still am. I don't know why. Like, we pay cash for everything. Like, we pay cash for our cars. We pay cash for our home remodel. Like, we just don't take out loans on stuff. And I don't ever really think to take out loans on stuff, sans, some credit cards for the business. And so I didn't really know how people would come up with, $1 million to buy a business or $10 million to buy a business. And so I learned a lot about SBA loans and what the other side goes through to look at a company like ours, and then how those valuations are made so that they seem reasonable to the SBA. And I was really appreciative of your company when you explained that to us, because like I said, we had so much inventory that was like outstanding, that was like on the way, where a lot of our capital was tied up. And there was some fine points in the SBA lending process that wouldn't necessarily allow us to include all of that in the sale price. And so, we had to come up with a creative strategy to sell the business for one price, and then also to have an agreement for the new buyer then to agree to buy all of that inventory from us moving forward. So that in our case, it didn't end up actually being an SBA loan, but that was one of the offers, was from somebody who wanted an SBA loan. So we had to kind of refinagle that in a creative way to make that happen. That deal ended up falling through, but then we also learned that you could take your retirement and you could turn it into this, I think they call it Rob's rollover. Another thing I'd never heard of. So as I'm asking myself, how the hell would I ever buy a $10 million company? Now I know a couple of things. I learned a lot about the SBA loan process and what they require. Just from selling my own business, I learned a lot about what the opportunities are for me to take my retirement account and use that as a way to buy a business rather than incurring new debt. So those were really two eye openers for me that I wasn't aware of before going through it with Trans World.
Yeah, it's really, it was eye openers for me too, Travis, because when we originally bought our business brokerage office too, we were in the same boat. Like, I'd never raised debt or money or anything to start a business. And when we bought our first business brokerage office, we bought it in cash too. And becoming more entrenched in the M&A world, you figure out like, wow, these, like, the government does some great things. They do some shady things and a lot of stuff in between, right? But like the SBA program and some of these like Rob structures and things like that, it's really interesting because when we look at how small to mid-sized businesses sell, if those things wouldn't be in place, like there would not be a dynamic marketplace, right? Because there just wouldn't be enough well-funded buyers. And it's really kind of incredible when you see how much money is put back into small business through acquisitions, just through like, those are just they're the two major programs that we use, but two of these major programs that are either government backed or structured. And but yeah, I was in the same boat 10 years ago too. I had no idea about it. And now, 70% of the clients that we work with end up using SBA, and then probably if we put Rob's in there too, it's probably 100% use some type of structure like that. So I'm glad you brought those 2 points up. It's not something we talk about a lot on the show. And I think it's something for listeners to know about, even if you're not thinking about buying or selling, like you can use that for growth capital too. And it's just something that's not well known, I think.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, real eye opener for us. And then I would say, like, the other thing is like, getting an offer, one thing I would change, and this doesn't have anything to do with the way that you guys did the business or did the deal. It was just kind of like my own naivety. But, one thing, I had made a comment about, the closing was going, like everything was going so smoothly, and I was like,
Oh, did you say that?
yeah, I was like, this can't be real. Like, I'm just like, then I start living in this paranoia that something's going to happen. And I think I had made a comment to our broker about that. And he was like, well, don't worry. If it falls through, I have, a list of other people who want to talk about it. That was just a side comment. But I think what I realized is, oh, you know what? If I were to do this again next time, I think I understand now, and you'll have to correct me, but I think there are ways that you can have a business for sale and entertain multiple wait for offers to come in. And I didn't do that. I just accepted the first offer that we got or actually it wasn't the first offer we got, but I accepted the first offer we got that was what we were asking for, right? So somebody came in and they're like, yeah, I love it. I'll give you what you want, and it was like, oh, really? Okay, yeah, we'll do it. You know what I mean? But like, I hadn't considered like if I was a little more patient, then maybe somebody would come in and offer more. And I did learn that I believe that there are different kinds of escrow options that allow either exclusivity or allow for multiple offers. And so I would say that in the future, I would probably keep myself open to more offers rather than taking the first listing offer thinking that no one else would offer more, I guess is what I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah. There's ways to do it with competitive bidding. And I think part of the pro of being able to prepare in advance is you can be more attractive to a lot of different buyers, right? And you can have that budding process. I will tell you though, I just did another interview where the whole topic was about business owners who should have taken their first offer because they waited to see. And then I'll forward you the interview I did because there's a whole host of issues. So
this is a no regrets comment, right? Like no regrets at all. Like, my father-in-law and I were ready to go, and we were just like tickled that someone was going to pay what we were asking. And I mean, and to end that story, not only did nothing ever happen, we closed early, which I understand is totally uncommon, right? So we had a dream team, we had a dream buyer, and we had a dream scenario. So no regrets there. That's just
that's amazing.
Maybe I would wait next time and just see if there were any more offers before I took the first one.
So I'm really interested to see how you answer this next question, because a lot of the people I talk to, like, they come on the show and they've built and sold one business. So their answer is on one side of the scale of this, but like, what was the day after like for you? Was there any emotion or regret, or was it a celebration? Like, what did you do the next day?
We were actually kind of on vacation because I think our close date was like November 23rd or 24th or something like that. And Thanksgiving was like 2 days later. So we were with some friends in a rental house in the mountains. But I mean, I was trying to be cool, even though I really wanted to celebrate, but I think I had a few drinks and there were a couple high fives, but the real moment was like, the buyer or whatever, they wire the money to like the business account, right? And then it has to like sit there. So like the next week I'm sitting at a massage table, with this, with my massage guy and my partner and the bank are trying to get the money into my account, right? Like wire it into my winnings, all of my winnings in my account. And I'm telling the guy, I've got to keep my phone on. I'm sorry, because the bank might need to get in touch with me. And I get this text and I grab my phone and it says like, it's done. And I refresh my bank account and I'm like, wow, like there's my money. Like it's done. Like, that was like that, that's one of those moments I'll never forget. Cause it was, it's like the first time it happened to me, and it was really fantastic. I joked often in the days following that I was retired and, that I was just being retired, but, I certainly didn't have enough money to really be retired. But I wouldn't say that it was the days following. It was more like the weeks after that. Cause it was really the first time in my life where I had some space, and I had some extra, money and I didn't have any employees and I didn't have a lot of pressures. And so, I said I was going to just take some time off and not really think about business and not do anything business related, even though I do have like some other smaller projects going.
Mhm.
But that created a real crisis of identity
Yep. No,
because
it's common.
because then I didn't know what the hell I was doing or
Mhm.
you know, or who I was, and I didn't feel like, I don't know, the stress and pressure that comes with being a business owner. And you can ask my wife, like, it was really bugging me out. Like, I needed something that I was focused on. I needed to pick something. And so I eventually did settle on what I was going to do next. And I've been, pursuing it since January, but it was a lot more unsettling than I thought. I thought it would come with all this freedom. I'd wake up, have a latte, read the paper, get my kids to school, wear my slippers all day, go to King Supers in my robe and be happy. And I just wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah. King Soopers in your robe. Yeah. No, you know what? I mean, and this is why I love to ask this question because it is a celebration, right? It's, and I talk about this on the show a lot. Only 13% of entrepreneurs are able to sell their companies. I call them the elite 13. It's a really big accomplishment to sell and it should be celebrated, but it also does come with this like identity crisis of like what do I do now? Like this was my role, this was my life. And for entrepreneurs that it was the only thing they've ever done, I think they experience a little bit more. So you get to this point. This is we've got a couple more questions left, but I really want to know because I don't see you retired ever. Like I know you personally, and then now sitting through the story, like that's just not going to happen, right? So what is next? What are you chasing next?
Well, that legal technology company that I had called Lawfather, the largest part of our business was renting audio video equipment to lawyers, consulting with them about how to give digital presentations at trial, and then sitting in the courthouse with them and running all of those trials. And COVID, just destroyed it. I mean, I can't say it any other way. Like the courts were closed for 2 years. I got through like a couple, 3 rounds, 2 rounds, I guess, of PPP. And then I just had to let everybody go. I mean, I just couldn't see when the business was going to come back. Right before that in 2019, I launched interactive timeline software for lawyers called Trial Line, which was really meant to just be a thing for our clients to allow our clients to make their own timelines for these trials or for mediation so that they could kind of do some stuff and then they could bring those to trial and show them. Or if they didn't want to hire our company, but they wanted a nice presentation software, they could use our software to make their presentations at trial. So kind of luckily and serendipitously, I launched this right before COVID hit. And so as I came out of COVID and kind of mourned the loss of Lawfather in our trial technology business, I did have this SaaS-based software that was really getting some traction and starting to take off. And so as things have wound down with Queen Anne Pillow, I've turned my focus to the interactive software Trial Line. And then an interesting thing happened over COVID was that a very prestigious hospital group reached out to me. They had found Trial Line and they were looking for timeline software that they could use to deliver information to patient families. Because remember, in the early days of COVID, you couldn't even go to the hospital to visit your loved one. So you had all these family members who had patients in the ICU or just in the hospital in general, and no real way to get information. And so this hospital group thought, gosh, if we could make these interactive timelines that would allow for these daily updates of treatment and prognosis, then we could really form a relationship with family members outside of the hospital and keep everybody happy and informed about what's going on. And so based on, this need in legal, based on this need in medical, as well as some education institutions who have come to us and some project management and construction management companies who have come to us, we've decided to launch Trial Line as a new company called Linely. I got my little,
There you
sign up
go.
there somewhere.
Yeah.
And Linely is now a platform as a service for timeline-based applications. So what we're doing is we're opening up our software, our timeline software, to all sorts of different industries so they can build their own businesses on top of ours. So much like how Salesforce allows you this database and CRM, but also you can hire developers to build on top of it whatever product you want. And then you can go sell that product to other people. Let's say you want to manage deals for Transworld or something. You could build a deal management software on top of Salesforce. You're going to be able to do that with Alignly. So you'll be able to build any kind of timeline-based application you want on top of our core product and then sell it or use it within your organization. So that's what I'm working on now, raising capital for the first time, going into debt for the first time. Pretty exciting.
Well, you've got to do it all, right? You've already had all the other entrepreneurial experiences. You got to go into tech and raise VC money, and you got to do all that next, right?
That's right. That's right.
So,
that's right.
All right. Yeah. Well, before I ask you our final question, if our listeners, which I'm sure they enjoyed our conversation together and they want to learn more about you, how can they follow you? How can they reach out?
Yeah, I would probably just start at travisluther.com. And then you can find all my social handles there and my blog and different stuff. But I would just say travisluther.com. And from there, you can learn how to find Linely and Trialign and all of the current and previous businesses I've been involved with.
Cool. All right. Last question. So you've had a host of lots of different entrepreneurial experiences. You've started, you've acquired, you've merged, you've exited. If you could wrap up all of your advice into one quote or one single line of advice, what would you say to our listeners that are just starting out?
The most important thing for me, though not terribly inspirational, is really understanding my cost of goods. Like really understanding, like going back to even the coffee shop example, knowing what is 8 ounces of milk costs, what 2 ounces of espresso costs, what a cup costs, what a lid costs, what the jacket costs, what the little red straw you stick in there costs, and what a packet of Sweet and Low costs, as well as what does that little carrier cost that everyone puts their drink in. There's just so many costs associated with a product that go unnoticed that when combined are like vastly, vastly important. And understanding that cost of goods through all my other businesses has been key to setting appropriate prices, understanding what my profit margins are, understanding how that profit margin affects cash flow, and understanding how that cash flow allows me to grow. So cost of goods is the most important thing I've learned in my business. My favorite business quote, though, is that if you want to double your successes, you have to triple your failures. And what that means to me is like, you just got to continue to accept risk and failure as part of what you're doing as an entrepreneur, and just know like the faster you can screw something up, the closer you are to success. And don't let failure be a reflection of who you are as a person. Just allow it to be part of a process that leads you to success.
Awesome. I love that. We'll end there. Travis, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and sharing your story with the listeners of How I Sold. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Jessica.
That's Travis Luther, founder of Queen Anne Pillow. This serial entrepreneur is never short on ideas or problems to solve, and he has definitely demonstrated in our conversation today that he has been able to accept risk and failure as part of his process that has led him to launch multiple successful businesses. Hey, thanks so much for listening to the show this week. If you want to support us, spread the word by subscribing on your favorite podcasting app or YouTube. You can also leave us a 5-star review and post about us on social media. We really do appreciate it. If you would like to learn more about How I Sold or even apply to be on the show, go to howisold.co. I'm Jessica Fialkovich, and you've been listening to How I Sold.
Thank you for listening to How I Sold, presented by Exit Factor. Please follow us on your favorite podcasting app so you don't miss an episode. Another way to support the show is by leaving a review. Find more information about How I Sold and Exit Factor, including how to be on the show at www.exitfactor.com/howisold.